Hello, everyone. I'm Ed Morin, an Amador County Master Gardener and your moderator for today. Thanks for attending the Amador County Master Gardeners Public Education Program entitled Summer Pruning. Before we begin, I'd like to go through a few housekeeping items. Please be aware that today's program will be recorded and posted on our website and our Facebook page. Please leave yourselves on mute during the presentation. We will be taking questions at the end. Just type your questions into the chat to everyone. We'll collect them and cover as many as possible today. For your convenience, the handouts and presentation covered today will be posted on our website in the next couple of days. Look under classes and events, then handouts and presentations. If you wish to review the recorded presentation, go to our Facebook page and look for Facebook Live during the meeting or find the video link on our feed later. Next slide, please. If you have a gardening question at any time, please contact us. The UC Master Gardeners of Amador County are working by phone and email to answer your questions. You can contact us by phone 209-223-6838, by email mgamador@ucanr.edu, on Facebook at UCCE Amador MG. If you're not located in Amador County, we strongly recommend that you direct your questions to your local Master Gardener program. You can find them by doing a web search for UCCE Master Gardener and your county name. Okay, housekeeping is done for now. I'm going to turn over control to our presenter for today. John Weimer has been a Master Gardener since 2017. John lives in the Pine Grove area and has several fruit trees that he has been rehabilitating over the past few years. He also manages our efforts in the Master Gardener Teaching Garden, located at our offices on 12200B Airport Road, Jackson. He will be showing us before and after examples of summer pruning efforts, and will be discussing when and how to prune to obtain the results you want. John, it's your turn.
Thank you, Ed. And welcome to our Zoom version of the late summer fruit tree pruning class. This is a class that we typically give in person with a lot of hands-on. People get an opportunity to actually do pruning at an on-site orchard. However, due to the COVID restrictions, we're hoping that we can give you some useful information. These slides were prepared by our longtime Master Gardener, Dennis Miller, who had years and years of experience in agriculture. And I will be presenting those slides with his blessing. So thank you to Dennis Miller. So the goals of our home orchard are to have fruit trees that are structurally strong, that are able to bear high quality fruit, and of a size that is easy and safe to maintain. As we get older, the idea of getting up on a ladder to prune, spray, or harvest is much less attractive, and it's not safe for people of any age actually being on a ladder. So we encourage people to maintain their trees at a safe level. Together with pruning and training, it permits us to control the size of the tree, the height and the width, to accommodate those projects that you need for pruning and harvesting, but also to accommodate the size of your backyard orchard. We're able to develop structural strength in the branches. We're able to open up the vegetation to distribute sunlight throughout the tree. to select branches that will renew flowering or fruit wood, and to correct any problems that we may have had from a wind event breaking a branch, different animals, foxes, raccoons getting up in your trees trying to steal your fruit and breaking branches, or we failed to thin the fruit enough and we've got too much fruit and it breaks the branches. So we're able to correct those issues. There's basic equipment that's needed for pruning. You need two types of shears. One is a bypass shears, which has two cutting blades that are scissor-like blades. The Anvil shears has one flat edge and the other a cutting blade, and those are very good for cutting your smaller branches and the twigs, etc., that don't do as well with the scissors. Having a pair of loppers. These have longer handles. You're able to reach higher, but also with the extended length of the handles, you get better leverage for cutting medium-sized branches. And then for your larger branches, using a pruning saw. It's very important to keep your tools sharp. So I encourage you to keep a file near your tools. When you finish, take a few swipes across the cutting edge of your tools so that they'll be ready for the next time that you need to use them. There's two kinds of pruning cuts. One is a heading and the other is a thinning cut. When you're doing a heading cut, it's important to make your cut at a 45-degree angle, especially on any kind of vertical branches, as that will prevent the water from pooling or ponding on it and attracting fungal or bacterial infections. Your thinning cuts, we want to, you'll see that there's a little collar that extends out from the main branch, and you want to make your cut just at the outside of that collar and not right up against the bark of the tree. This will allow a natural healing, a scarring that will seal itself off and prevent insects and infections from getting into the fresh cut. You want to use two cuts when removing a large limb. Large limbs can start to tear rather than give you a nice clean cut. So decide where you want to make your initial cut or your final cut, and then move out 2 to 3 feet from that distance and make your first cut. Most of the time, when you're halfway through, that branch will start to tear on its own, and you'll get a ripping and a very irregular tear. So that's all right because it's not in the part of the limb that you want to retain. After that is removed, then you'll have a smaller amount of limb to remove, and you'll be able to make a nice smooth cut at the location that you desire. You don't want to use any paints or emulsions on your cuts because that can trap moisture or diseases inside there and cause problems later. There's 3 basic sizes of trees. Your standard tree, which you'll see in commercial orchards. They can grow to be 25 to 30 feet in height. Your semi-dwarfs, which will grow to 15 to 20 feet, and then your dwarf plants will grow to be 8 to 10 feet. And you can make your selection depending on the amount of room that you have in your backyard. But you can just take a standard tree, which has typically a longer lifespan. They tend to be more resistant to diseases, have better root systems. And by managing them from the time that you plant them, you can keep them at the size of a dwarf tree. When you get your bare root plants in the fall, if they're available, it's good. Go ahead and get them planted. Most of the time, I found that you either have to order them or they don't arrive at the nursery until January. So as soon as they're available, you can get them planted. If for any reason you can't get them, you purchase them and you can't get them in the ground right away, you want to keep that root ball moist, you can dig a small hole, put the root ball in that hole, cover it up, moisten it, and you can wait a couple, as much as a few weeks before you have the opportunity to get your final planting. Once you plant them, you want to cut off the top portion of the bare root. Typically, they can be 4 to 6 feet in height when you purchase them, but you want to head them off at somewhere between 18 and 30 inches. This is Dennis here, planting a Lambert cherry tree in February. And you can see in his left hand is the amount of the top of the bare root that he removed. So that bare root tree was probably 5 or 6 feet tall. He's headed it off at mid-thigh, so he's 24 to 30 inches. And so it gives you an idea of where you want to start with your new tree. During the first fall or dormant season, you want to select 3 or 4 good scaffold branches that are evenly spaced around the trunk, using the 4 directions of the compass or a spoke wheel. You want to have your first set of branches starting off around 18 to 20 inches from the ground. Don't select any branches that grow right above one another, because you want the sunlight to be able to penetrate evenly throughout your tree. Don't select any flat or horizontal limbs that run parallel to the ground. You want to select branches that have a limb angle or a crotch angle of 45 to 60 degrees, which is the most desirable, so that it'll be able to withstand more weight. This is that same Lambert tree in September, so 6 months. We've got quite a bit of new growth. We're developing the shape of the tree and keeping the angle with the use of some rope tied around the branches with a stake in the ground and pulling it down to the angle, the desired angle, somewhere between 45 and 60 degrees. You can see there's probably about 4 feet of new growth here. So we're going to prune that back. And he's removing about half of the length of that new growth. You can see in the center, there is no branch going up. We're trying to keep an open vase-shaped opening so that sunlight can penetrate in there. By pruning at this time, we're able to maintain the size of the tree, the height, and the width, the tree shape, keeping it nice and evenly shaped with the branches coming out all around, and keeping a strong tree structure. There's certain trees that tend to have more upright growth, and cherry trees are one of them. So that necessitates the need for using some kind of device to maintain the angle of your branch. Again, we're looking down on the same cherry tree, and you can see we've got 4 nice branches going out in each direction. We've got you can see the ropes that are attached to the branches to maintain the limb angle that we desire. he's once it's pruned off, you can see now it's a waist-high tree. So that first set of branches is going to be relatively low and easy to manage, and then we can allow growth at another level above that later. So this makes for a good foundation. We've got stronger branches, and by removing that extra vegetation, instead of the food and energy going into making new growth, it's also going into the root system to make a better root system for future. Here's that same tree 2 years later. And again, cherry trees tend to like to grow upright. So we need to utilize throughout the life of the tree to try to maintain those limb angles. So in this case, we've got some wooden spreaders between the branches. You notch the ends of it to accommodate the size of the branch and hold it in place. You can also, again, use the rope system, although at a certain point, it becomes kind of an obstacle to have to work around. So the use of the spreaders works really good. Also, on the tree behind here, you can see that there's some water bottles hanging from that tree. And this is a method that I like to use. By filling a water bottle with different amounts of water and hanging it from that branch, you can achieve a specific angle to maintain. You do not want to use that method, though, in the fall or winter, because the branches are more brittle, and with a wind event, it can cause tearing or breaking of your branches. So it's best to utilize that system in the springtime when there's more elasticity in the branches, and you can bring the branch angle down to your desired effect. There is a hormone that is in the tips of fruit trees. It's called auxin, AUXIN, and auxin stimulates vegetative growth. And you have more auxin being you have more auxin in the tips of the trees when the branch is vertical. And so with that, you'll get a lot more vegetative growth. By taking the angle of your branch down, it restricts the effects of the auxin and will allow for more fruiting growth. So it's important to understand that effect of the hormones in keeping the shape of your tree. This open center method on the left gives you a vase shape or a martini glass shape, keeps it nice and open in the center. Sunlight can penetrate in there. You get air to reduce the opportunity for fungal diseases. There's also the modified central leader system, so that you've got your first set of branches coming off, again, around 2 feet high, and then allowing a central leader to move up, and then another 2 to 3 feet above that first set of branches, you're encouraging another set of branches. Hopefully you don't do them right above each other. You keep that spiral stair step effect so that you will allow sunlight to penetrate to the lower branches. We've got the central leader method over here. This is a commercial orchard. So they prepare their trees so that they oftentimes can be mechanically harvested. Over here on the left is a very attractive way of pruning your trees. Gives you a nice landscape appeal. It's called a espalier. You have a central leader that your first set of branches, again, about 2 feet off the ground. You're selecting only 2 branches that are at 180 degrees opposite from each other. And then a central leader, another 2 feet up, another set of 2, and again, a third. Typically, there's 3 levels on most of the ones that I've seen. You can go as high as you want. This method works really good on fence lines or up against your house. The one thing with this method is that you do need to provide support. So you'll need some kind of wire supports, and you will select branches that have the initial angle that we want, but we're going to bend it and start training it to go parallel to the ground and be supported by this wire. This allows for the support of the vegetation and hopefully an abundance of fruit. So when do we want to prune? There's benefits to all 4 seasons. Late summer pruning, after the fruit is picked, and this helps to control the shape and new growth. So controlling the height. I just finished pruning my apricot trees. The fruit's been picked off a month or so ago, and so now I'm opening the trees up, getting the excess vegetation off, and we'll talk about apricots more in a minute. Summer pruning is done in May or June. You've got fruit on the tree. It's a good, important time to thin and head off those upright shoots that are not contributing to the fruit growth. And it allows the light to penetrate in so that you get better ripening of your fruit. And this also, because the hormones that are being emitted during that time, you don't get as much stimulation of new growth when you prune at this time. Winter pruning during the dormant season, that's when I always learn to do my pruning. And so this is a recent method of pruning to me, to do it in the summertime. But wintertime, all the leaves are gone. You're able to get in and really see what the framework of the tree is. You can thin or head any branches that were not adequately pruned during the growing season. You can remove dead spurs and dead wood more easily. And then there's the pruning in the early spring, especially for stone fruits, your peaches and nectarines and plums, right after the bud burst. By doing some light pruning at that time, you can restrict the amount of fruit that you're going to be setting, and that will allow you to have to do less thinning of the fruit later on in the season. Apricots are the exception to winter pruning. I learned the hard way. I inherited a very large apricot tree that was 25 or 30 feet tall, and I would prune it diligently every January, not knowing that it was not the wisest thing to do, because there is a fungal disease called Eutypa dieback that it's susceptible to because of the humidity and the wet conditions. I have lost several branches to this disease, and may ultimately have to replace my tree, but I'm trying to stay ahead of it, and it seems to be doing okay at this time. But you don't want to prune apricots until after the rains in the spring or late summer before the rains start. I mentioned earlier that there's certain trees, the cherry tree particularly, plums, pears, and apples, that like to grow in an upright fashion. So they will just naturally want to shoot vertically. And that will require you to utilize spreading devices, using the water bottles, or early on the use of the ropes and stakes to maintain that 45 to 60 degree angle. So you want to bend those branches outward with various devices. Other fruits have a more natural spreading growth pattern. The apricots, the nectarines, peaches, and almonds. But they will still send upright shoots, so you will either need to remove those, or if you want to maintain them, use a spreading device for those as well. Okay, we're getting a little hesitation here on my slide. Excuse me, but my slide doesn't want to advance. Okay.
John, try using your enter button and let's see if that will get you.
Okay. No.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, it just froze up here. My apologies for technical problems here. I don't know what, let's see if I do escape, that doesn't help me. Well, this is.
John, click on your PowerPoint slide.
Okay.
Anywhere.
Oh, okay, there we go. Okay. All right, so my apologies for the technical problem, but we're back in business again. So why do we want to summer prune? Fruit needs to have sunlight to ripen properly. And we also want to put our energy into the fruit production rather than vegetative growth. So you can see how full this tree is. There's a lot of fruit on this tree, and it's being shaded by all this new growth. This growth is providing no benefit to the tree or to the fruit. So we want to remove that. When you are pruning and you're cutting wood that's or branches that are more than 2 years older, that's going to stimulate water sprouts. And water sprouts are just suckers that will not provide any benefit to the tree, the root system, or anything. So we want to remove those in the early spring, and you can either peel them off or use your hand shears to remove them. And they may continue to grow through the summer, but as they emerge, you want to remove those. So understanding the timing and the regulation of vegetative growth allows us to get a predictable response to certain types of pruning. Fruit tree can store up to 50 pounds of sugars or carbohydrates. When you prune in the winter, major winter pruning will stimulate more vigorous growth in the spring. Summer pruning gives you a different effect because of the way the hormones respond to the the pruning during that part of the year. As I mentioned earlier, there's two types of pruning cuts. There's heading cuts. So a heading cut is removing the terminal or end portion of the shoot or branch and leaving the base or the basal portion attached to the tree. Whenever the terminal stem is removed or damaged during the active season, it's going to stimulate growth just beneath the cut. So you're going to stimulate 1 to 3 lateral buds closest to where you made your cut. You want to avoid your heading cuts in the wintertime because it's going to stimulate a lot of new growth in the spring, unless that's what you want to achieve. But most of our pruning, we're trying to remove excess vegetation. So making your heading cuts either late spring or so after the growth spurt, or in the late fall, in August and September. Thinning cuts are where you remove the entire branch. And so if you've got 4 branches on one side of the tree, you want to possibly remove 1 or 2 of them to keep it open. And when you do this, you want to select the bigger branches, which seems counterproductive, but by eliminating the bigger ones and keeping the smaller ones, those smaller ones are going to grow more vigorously and produce more fruit in the next coming year. The exception is if you've got a branch that is kind of growing, it's bent down below the horizontal line. You can do your heading cuts where you're removing the tips, because the effects of the auxin will not be very strong because of the way that the branch is bent down. So it's inhibiting the auxin. Whereas if you cut the tips off of these that are more upright, that auxin effect is going to stimulate more vegetative growth. The effects of thinning versus heading cuts. When you're doing a thinning cut, what we're doing here is we're removing entire branches at various levels to give us more space in between the other branches, the remaining branches. It doesn't have the same effect, has a minimal amount of effect of removing a terminal bud, because when you're removing the entire branch, you're also removing the terminal bud as well. So if you're only removing 50%. It has a very small stimulating effect of new growth, but it will stimulate more spur action in the remaining branches the following year. Over here, your heading cuts, you're removing the tips of each one of these. So you're going to get a lot of stimulation of new growth. And then it will not give you as much spur formation in the following year. If you have a large tree, which is the situation I had when I bought this house, I had 2 very large trees, apricot and plum tree, that were 25, 30 feet tall. And it's daunting to try to manage a tree. You're up on an orchard ladder, higher than I'd like to be. And it's difficult to prune and to harvest. In fact, the birds get more of the fruit than I did. So when you have a tree like that, you want to remove no more than 3 major limbs at a time, but this will start to allow for better light distribution into the tree. You don't want to remove any more than 25% of the tree in any one year, because it can really shock the tree and retard it for quite some time. It will stimulate some new shoots, water shoots, so you want to remove those as they emerge. And this bringing the derelict tree down under control will be done over a 3 to 4 year period. So I'm still actively bringing those trees down, but they're at a much more manageable height now, and they're a healthier tree. There's a Fuji apple that was planted in February on the left. This is before it was pruned. You can see there's new growth. Those branches are 3 to 4 feet in length. Here we're removing approximately half of the length of the new growth. Excuse me. You can see he's pruned it down to waist height for that first set of branches. We've got a nice open center, 4 really good structural scaffold branches to start from. Got our nice vase shape. This is an apple tree that it has a lot of fruit on it. It's September, so it hasn't harvested yet, but you can see there's a lot of growth. In fact, you can hardly see the fruit on it. So we're going to remove 3 or 4 feet of the top of that so that it allows for air and sunlight to penetrate into the fruit and branches of the tree. Here's looking down on that same tree, nice and open in the center, nice angles on the branches, and then this is in dormant season where you now can get a much better idea of the actual structure and do some fine tuning of your pruning and removing of any dead wood. This is a Rainier cherry tree that was planted in February, and now 2 years later, you can see that it's got some upright growth on those branches. It's September. The harvested cherries will produce typically in May, and so they've been the fruit's already off the tree, and now we're going to start managing the size and height of the tree. Here we are. You can see now that that tree is it's at shoulder height, and we're going to be able to manage that tree. You can see that this we're still managing the angles of the branches with ropes and stakes because these cherry trees are ones that just naturally want to grow upright. By keeping your trees small and manageable, you open up a whole lot of area to be able to grow other things in that same garden area. If you have a 25-foot fruit tree, although the trunk is only utilizing maybe a 12-inch diameter space in the ground, it's shading your entire garden, and you won't be able to use it for other things. So this opens by keeping it more manageable, you can have better use of your entire garden. It's also good to grow flowers in your vegetable and fruit tree orchard to attract pollinators into fertilizing your fruit trees and giving you a greater amount of fruit. This is a 4-year-old pluot that was planted in February of 2004, so it's a 4-year-old tree. You can see that tree now is about as tall as Dennis is here. And then afterwards, he's brought it down a couple of feet. There is a lot of fruit on this tree. Getting rid of that extra vegetation allows the sunlight to penetrate for better ripening. You can see you can get a tremendous amount of fruit from a relatively small tree. This is a white peach tree that he's grafted apricot onto one side. The branches before he pruned it are as tall as he is. So we've got a 6-foot tree that now afterwards, it's a 3 to 4 foot tree. You can get beautiful fruit, nice size and quantity with a relatively small tree. Here's a pear tree in the late summer. Lots of vegetative growth. They like to have that upright growth pattern. So that tree is about 8 feet tall. After he's pruned it, it's at shoulder height. There's a lot of fruit on this tree that now is going to have a better ripening effect. You can see the pears in there. And the amount of pears, I was amazed at the amount of pears that were harvested off this relatively small tree. So more than enough for the average family to have fresh fruit, as well as do any kind of preserving that you would like. So the keys to pruning are understanding the timing and regulation of vegetative growth, which allows for a predictable response to certain types of pruning. So major winter pruning will give you more vigorous growth, which can be desired depending on what's happened with your tree, or the summer pruning, which limits the, and it makes it more manageable as far as the amount of growth. Thank you for your attention, and I'll take any questions that you have at this time. Before I move on to questions, I do want to let you know that there is a great book that's available on the UCANR EDU website. It's called The Home Orchard. It's by Chuck Ingalls, and it is the Bible for the home orchard. It's an excellent book, got great pictures, and highly encourage anyone that has some fruit trees to purchase this. And I get no royalties. So do we have any questions?
Yeah, John, this is Lori. We have our first question, and thank you for asking this, Monique, because that was my same question. Can olive trees be pruned in the summer as well?
I'm going to have to defer on that one because I don't have any experience with olive trees. So I would, I'm just going to would have to look it up and give you, get back to you on that particular question.
Okay, and anybody else, if you do have questions, just type them in the chat. You'll find that at the bottom, and we will ask John. And Tracy has also put in there where to buy that home orchard book as well. So while we're waiting, John, I have another question. Pomegranate trees, do they fit into this category that I could prune now?
Yes, they would. Anytime after harvest of your fruit.
You have to have a harvest first, so I think I need to prune my tree. Okay.
Yeah. So your main times to do the biggest amount of pruning would be early spring after your bud burst, and you want to control the amount of potential fruit, or after your fruit has been harvested, to go in and start managing the height and the length of your branches So anytime after harvest is a good time to do a major pruning. The one exception is persimmons. Persimmons are kind of a self-pruning tree, and by removing the ends of your branches, it's going to reduce the amount of fruit that you're going to get in the next coming year. Typically, these, like I said, they're self-pruning, so you will find dead branches, and you'll just remove the dead wood. And if a tree starts to get too high, then obviously, bringing down the height of it to maintain ease of harvesting is desirable.
Okay, and Tracy did find the answer. It's in chat for the olive tree. Prune them in late spring, early summer. Shouldn't be pruned until they're about 4 years old, with the exception of removing suckers to a single trunk. Okay, next question from Diane. Can citrus trees be pruned this way in the summer? And Christine tagged on anything different with regard to citrus trees.
Yeah, citrus trees typically don't need to be pruned except to control the width or the height. But you don't, in order to encourage your fruit, you really don't have to prune a citrus tree. But again, if you have a dwarf tree, it's going to self control its size. But a full-size citrus tree, I've seen them 20 feet tall. You can't get to the fruit. So just in order to maintain height and width to control it into your yard is the only reason that you need to prune a citrus tree.
Okay, thank you. Monique, is there a tool to use to prune tall trees that were here before we bought the house? I have a huge plum tree. I can't reach the branches to prune.
Yes. You have pole saws, either electric or gas. So they start out about 8 feet long with the pole, but they have an extension. So you can extend them out to almost 15 feet. They can be kind of awkward to use because of the weight of the saw on the end, especially if you have it extended out very far. Getting up, having a fruit ladder is very important if you've got a large tree. And a fruit ladder is a three-legged ladder, so it can accommodate to uneven soil around there, and it's a much safer tree. You really don't want to get up on a four-legged ladder on a slope or anything that's uneven. But that's the best tool for getting up high, other than having a ladder and a small handsaw. I will tell you that I just purchased it's a mini chainsaw that you can hold in one hand. Not that I'm promoting a brand, but the only one I've seen is a steel brand, and you can literally hold it in one hand. It's got a 10-inch blade, and it's really nice for getting in and being able to cut a branch that is 2 to 4 inches in diameter. But again, you'd have to utilize that, you have to be up on a ladder to get up high. So the pole saw would be your best opportunity.
Okay. Anne wants to know, my Fuyu persimmon tree has fruit and also growing a lot of new branches. Should I cut back new branches, and how far back should I prune?
I would only cut, I have a Fuyu also, and I would only cut branches that are growing where you don't want them. So again, persimmons will fruit from the new growth. By pruning the ends of your trees to maintain or cut back the length of your branches, you're going to restrict any fruit the following year. So you may need to do that if the tree is getting too large for you to either accommodate the height or the width in your backyard. But again, persimmons, you want to do a very minimal amount of pruning on, because it doesn't stimulate new growth. In fact, it retards growth of the fruit the following year. So just removing dead wood is what I recommend.
Okay. We are still open to questions. Tracy is posting links on olives, on persimmons, so check the chat and look for those. John, do you have like a calendar you put out for when to prune and how to prune?
You know, it
Just depends on.
varies depending on where you live.
Okay.
And you know what elevation. So we don't really have a calendar, but I believe, I mean, that we went through kind of the general times when you want to do your pruning, and that applies to almost all of your stone and palm fruits. So I would just, you know, think about those times as the proper time to do your pruning.
Okay.
But it will change depending on, you know, if you're at 6,000 feet versus at sea level, you're gonna,
Right.
it's gonna change the month that you'll be doing those. But otherwise, those are the times to do your pruning.
Okay. Do we have any more questions? We're going once, going twice. I don't see anybody. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, John. Ed, are you up?
Thank you so much for attending our presentation about summer pruning today. Remember, this presentation will be posted on our website early next week if you should want to review it. Happy gardening, everyone.
Thank you.